Welcome to The Disciplined Life. I'm Aria.
And I'm Coda.
We use our experience as a married couple living in a domestic discipline marriage to talk about the ups and downs of implementing authority structure and domestic discipline into modern relationships.
Let's do it. Hello, everyone.
Hey guys, welcome into the podcast. On today's podcast, we are going to be talking through how to affirm the position of the head of household through the 5 love languages. If you listened in last week, you will remember that we talked about rewards for the take it in hand and how to use the love languages to determine what rewards are most meaningful. And we kind of teased into taking the approach of how to affirm the head of household in the same way. So that's what we're talking through today. Before we get into that, if you are not already, please subscribe, like this video, leave it a comment, all those good things. It really does help out the channel. And if you want to support what we're doing and get bonus content, a link to our Patreon is down below. So if you are unfamiliar with the 5 love languages, it comes from a book called The 5 Love Languages.
Obviously, right?
By Gary Chapman. I've never read the book, but I've heard the concept of the 5 love languages a lot. It is pretty common, but if you haven't heard of it, there is an online quiz that you can take to determine what your love language is.
I actually didn't know that. I was like, I read the book many, many years ago, but I didn't know there was a quiz.
There is. And if you're like me, as we go through this, you're going to be like, all of those things seem like things that anyone would appreciate. And you're right. All of these things are good things. And I think most people would appreciate, things that fall into all of these categories. But most people have a primary and maybe a secondary love language that is the most meaningful to them. So it's not that they don't appreciate, things in those other love languages, but really to play into their primary or their secondary love language makes the interaction more meaningful. And so that's the benefit of kind of figuring out what your love language is to figure out, okay, how do I receive and feel appreciated and feel loved in the most meaningful way, and playing into that as a strength.
So just to kind of recap the 5 love languages, the first one is words of affirmation. The second one is acts of service. Third one is receiving gifts. And the fourth is quality time. And then the fifth is physical touch. So those are the 5 languages according to Gary Chapman. Again, I don't want anybody to think like these are the only languages according to the 5 love languages book by Gary Chapman. Those are the 5.
And that's a good point, that don't feel boxed into these, but this really does offer like kind of a really good framework and a starting point to kind of start thinking about using these broad categories in order to help your taken in hand or head of household feel appreciated and affirmed within the relationship.
Yeah. And so, just as Aria said, we don't ever want you all to feel that, especially if we reference something that, because what I remember from reading this book is it does feel a little boxed in, because as good as the author does with this, he kind of acts like these are the only 5. So use it as a guide, just like with everything, use it as a guide, but don't feel like you have to be boxed into these 5, okay?
Do you know your primary love language, secondary?
Even because I didn't know there was a quiz, just based on reading the book, which when I say I read the book many years ago, it was many, many years ago. Yes, mine, I definitely need words of affirmation. Words of affirmation go a long way for me, and quality time are my big ones. When people give me words of affirmation and say they also want to spend time with me, those are my big love languages. So
that's good to know.
Which, by the way, I mean, we'll talk more about this as we go on the podcast. I feel like Aria is really good at both of those. The times that she really, it means a lot when she says that she wants to spend time with me, when she wants to do things with me that I enjoy, and also yeah, I want to spend time with you at the end of the night, and I want to, watch movies with you, or watch a show, or just spend time talking, or go out to dinner, any of those kind of things. When she expresses that she wants to do those things, it actually means a lot to me. So,
well, and I think that's because quality time is a shared love language of ours.
that's true. That's true.
My primary love language is physical touch, and then quality time coming in a close second. So because we have that in common, we really do play into that well with each other.
But my primary one, obviously, is words of affirmation. This one is really big, and this is why I know it's my primary. I feel like Arya does a really good job. And again, this is something we both have learned about each other's love languages over the years. But she knows that I really need to hear things like, hey, thank you for leading our family. Thank you for doing a good job. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for holding me accountable to the rules. All of those different things. And she has learned to not be like doing that constantly either. So it doesn't cheapen the words of affirmation, but she does a really good job of giving those to me. I find too, they come at the right time when maybe I've had a hard day at work or a hard day at school, and she gives me a good pick me up by saying, hey, thank you for, again, holding me accountable to the rules, for being a good head of household, all of those things. And that really means a lot. And so and so I don't know, I guess I should publicly just say thanks for for doing that. I think the next thing is as we talk about these, it's really important as a taken in hand to figure out where your head of household falls in these.
Yeah, I really try, because I know that that's your primary love language. I really do try to be very intentional and very specific. So it's not just like, oh, hey, thanks for leading our family. It's like,
right.
it's more of like, hey, in this situation, I really noticed that you took the lead there, and I really appreciate it. And I try to be specific so that you know that it's coming from a place of genuine appreciation. So yeah, let's go through the love languages. Now that you know our primary love languages, we will do our best to kind of cover the ones that maybe we don't lean into as much, because again, it's not that neither one of us appreciates these things, it's just not the most meaningful to us. So
should we start back at one though and just kind of go through them? So
let's do it.
The words of affirmation that we just talked about. If your head of household, if you maybe find that he's being very, very distant, or that he is seeming a little down, or really this is, I think, a very good sign, because of that he's needing some words of affirmation. He's just not motivated to hold you to the rules. He's not motivated to keep to keep the schedule of maintenance and different things like that. Maybe he's somebody that needs words of affirmation, because I'm the kind of person, when I don't get that, I kind of go, I do a so-so job. I just start to just do the bare minimum, and I don't really find excitement in what I do anymore. And it really takes a lot of motivation for me to get back on track for that. So if your head of household is struggling in that area, maybe he's a words of affirmation type person.
And words of affirmation don't have to be this long speech. They don't have to.
Yeah.
It can be. And sometimes that's really meaningful, to have a formal sit down and just kind of give them those accolades that they have earned and deserve. But it can be as simple as like, hey, I really appreciate you making the decision on that one. Yeah. Or, I have gotten in the habit that after maintenance, after punishment, I thank Coda for the effort that it took.
Yeah. Which I appreciate,
to go through that. Yeah. And so saying thank you, acknowledging when they've taken the lead, when they've made a decision, when it's worked out well. On the flip side of that, you can't, like Coda was just saying, how he sometimes lacks that motivation and lacks that drive when he doesn't get those words of affirmation. If he gets in those lulls, the way I help him get out of it is by giving him that positive affirmation. You can't, especially for somebody that is a words of affirmation, criticism is the kryptonite to
That
words
is
of
so
affirmation.
true. So true. Yes.
And so if I come at him and be like, why aren't you holding me accountable to these rules? And I feel like I'm getting away with everything. And I feel like you don't care. No, like if I come at him with now that feedback is important, but it has to be
Yes.
delivered in a certain way, because I do need to communicate to him like, hey, this is really starting to affect our relationship. But if I come at it at like a critical or accusatory way, then that really just dampens the
Absolutely.
growth of our relationship. And
Hmm.
so you really need to be careful that if you want to see positive change, that you give positivity, you don't bring it down with the negative.
Absolutely. And I think you've done a really good job of when she realizes I'm in those lulls to really encourage me to come back. But yeah, you're right. If you give that negativity, if they were already digging a hole, they're just going to dig it deeper. It's not going to help bring them out of the hole. But again, you find that balance, as Aria said, you still need to communicate that. You don't want to hold that to yourself, but you got to figure out a way to communicate it so where they don't keep digging the hole down.
Because as taken in hands, part of our role and part of our job is to help our head of household. And the way we can help them is by how we interact with them and how we present ourselves.
Yes.
And so I feel like that kind of covers.
No, I think that covers that.
Okay.
So the second one is, and this one I might need your help on here because I think Aria may understand this a little bit more than I do. But acts of service. This is one that is not one of my love languages. In fact, it's not really something that I think is even kind of on my radar sometimes. So act of service, how do you think that kind of goes into?
And part of the difficulty of our relationship is acts of service is my favorite way to show love.
Right.
Because we talked about the love languages and your primary or secondary, that's how you like to receive love, but there are ways that you prefer to show
love. Yeah, right.
And so I really love acts of service for that. And so it's difficult that you don't necessarily receive it that way.
It's like not even on the radar. That doesn't mean I don't care what she does, but like if she does something to kind of show me, hey, I love you, I kind of go,
oh, okay.
What you talking about? Like, of course you love me. You told me.
So acts of service, if you have a head of household that really receives acts of service as their primary love language or even a secondary, what is really important to them is to see that you are going out of your way to do things for them, specifically for them, to make their lives easier. So for me, that can include things like making sure that Coda has everything he needs ready for the day. It could be waking up and making them a hot breakfast before they leave for work.
That sounds good. No, I'm not really a breakfast eater, so.
It could be setting out their shoes. It could be just stopping what you're doing and going to greet them at the end when they walk in the door. It could be making their favorite meal. It could be doing the housework to their standards so that when they walk in, everything is in order the way they like. Now, I do most of those things.
I would say if not all of those things that you just named.
But I know I do that out of duty, not because that really feeds into Coda's love languages.
And it's not that I don't appreciate it. When I say it's not on my radar, I do appreciate it, but it's not something that if she didn't do it, that I would somehow get upset or feel shunned, because it's not one of my love languages.
And to a certain extent, that does make it a little easier on me, because if I do get behind on things, I know that it's not going to disrupt the connection between us. And so you have to figure out, because if you have a head of household that they really do value those things and it is going to disrupt the connection, you need to set your priorities accordingly.
Yes, absolutely, because that could derail really fast, I think.
The next one is receiving gifts.
I think this is one that I think is kind of on this is your acts of service, like from the standpoint of it's not on your radar, would you say?
Yeah, I was going to say receiving gifts is not something that is a value to me at all.
Not that you don't like receiving gifts, but it's not your
like if Coda's out and about and he thinks of me and he grabs me like my favorite treat from the store, I obviously really appreciate that, but it's not something I need on an ongoing basis. It's
Right.
not something, I don't need these elaborate displays of gifts to feel loved.
Thank goodness, because no, I'm just
And I think that this is one that, at least from my observation, a lot of men don't necessarily or receiving gifts is just not something that a lot of men hold a lot of value in.
It's very true. It's very rare. I was gonna say I don't think even some of my closest friends have this as a love language at all, even as a secondary. So,
but if you do have a head of household that receiving gifts is something that they value, it can be difficult to kind of try to figure out what that looks like, because you obviously can't necessarily be giving elaborate like gifts all the time, but trying to find those small things, like if you are grocery shopping and you see like their favorite snack, getting that and saying this is just for you. Maybe making their favorite dessert. That can be an act of service, but that can also be something that you are gifting them.
Yeah, this one kind of overlaps because, making their favorite meal, like you were talking about,
yeah,
that can help too.
And maybe even if you're doing it under the guise of gifts, then maybe making it special, like setting out candles, setting the table, doing something that kind of creates more of a display of that could be considered a gift. Even something, I don't know, like again, this is something we really struggle with.
Yeah, because this one's not even, this is not even a secondary for you or for me.
No, in fact, when I took the quiz, like receiving gifts was like the bottom of the barrel, and I think I only like scored like 2 points out of 100 on that one.
That's where I was. That's probably where I would be with acts of service, and this would probably maybe just be a little bit higher than that, but they would be very, very low on the list. So
I think with giving gifts or receiving gifts as the love language, and giving gifts as the person who's trying to display that love language, just try to think of small ways that you can make that an ongoing effort, but also consider holidays, birthdays, gift-giving occasions, even things like your anniversary, Valentine's Day, all of those little things.
Mother's Day, right? Like,
yeah, all of those things. Even things like St. Patrick's Day.
That's so true, though. No, that's so true. That's why I'm laughing.
They would, if you have a person that in your life, if you have a head of household that likes receiving gifts, even something to be like, hey, it's St. Patrick's Day and I got you a little gift basket with like some goofy like glasses and some candy, and just those little things really do mean a lot to somebody who really likes receiving gifts.
I have someone in my family that that their love language is receiving gifts, and that other person in my family, boy, they've had to learn to be creative throughout their life. So
and so yeah, that's, try to get creative, but also play into those gift-giving holidays. Really try to make those special and elaborate.
So the next one, and we've talked about this because this is both, I think we said this is both our secondary, is quality time. So we'll talk just a little bit about this because we've already kind of talked about this at length for the both of us, since it's a secondary of us. But that can be anything as at the end of the night, which we try to do during the week. We love sitting down together, having a cuddle time, just being together and watching our favorite show together and just spending time together. If you don't have, I would encourage you, we have a teenager now, but I would encourage you to try to have family meals together. We at least get together. We allow our child to not necessarily have to be with us all the time, but that can be also a great quality time where you catch up on the day. I enjoy dinner time with our Aria to catch up on the day and to just talk about life a little bit and just see how she's doing and check in. And that's another thing. The dinner table can be a really great place to have quality time.
Yeah, I would say that if you have somebody that really values quality time and you don't, then you're going to have to find a balance.
Yes,
but
very much so. You're
but
absolutely
because
right.
we both hold this as in very high regard, basically if Coda's home, we are together. We are either in the same room, we are talking, we are spending time together. Even if we have to work on separate projects, we are next to each other while doing
Yes. Again, same room. She could be doing something in the kitchen and I'm at the kitchen table while we're doing that.
And so it's really just about carving out that time. And I was reading recently, just on social media, about how other couples function. And it surprises me that some couples will go like days without spending any really length of time together.
That's crazy.
Like they might check in, but it's a quick check-in and then they're kind of off doing their own things. Like that is just not how we function as a couple at all.
That would be a couple that definitely, this would not be one of their primary or secondary ways of showing affection or love.
Now, I will say that for quality time, date nights might be a priority. I don't necessarily feel like we have to date. I don't feel like we don't really like quote unquote date, go out on dates.
Right.
Very often, but that's because we are spending like almost every minute together. And so things like we'll go out to lunch, but I don't consider it a date. It's just that we're together. That's what we need to eat. So.
Yeah, and sometimes, I'll come home from work and I'll just say, hey, do you just want to go over to the local McDonald's over here and just get something to drink? And we'll just sit there, and that's part of our spending time together. It's just something that we do, and we just sit there and we, sip on our drink and just catch up with one another.
But if you have a head of household or even a taken in hand that really values quality time and the other person doesn't, then making time for those date nights is going to be more important.
That's key. Absolutely.
Because you want to feed into that need that they have for that quality time. And I would really encourage, I think it's healthy for every relationship, but especially if you have somebody that values quality of time, I would really encourage you to carve out at least an hour to just be together.
Yes. That's great advice because yeah, if you are somebody in the relationship that's not one of your love languages, but your spouse is, we're not saying that you have to dedicate as much time as we do, since that's valuable to us. But yeah, try to at least talk to your spouse and say, hey, an hour every day, would that be helpful for us to just get together? Like Aria said, is very good advice for that. And then, of course, the last one, which we've talked about, is Aria's primary. And I'm just curious, have you found that a lot of women, this is their primary?
More men have this as a primary.
Interesting. Okay, so this is physical touch, which maybe it is surprising that this is not one of my love languages, but it is for Aria, as we talked about.
And the reason why most men find that this is a higher on the priority, either a primary or secondary, is because this is where physical intimacy and sexual connection comes into play.
Right, comes into play.
And most men have a higher need for sexual intimacy in their relationships. And so they will find that physical touch is a priority to them. For me, I obviously do place a lot of value on the physical intimacy of our relationship. That is something that I really do need on a consistent basis. However, that doesn't happen every single day. I mean, I'm willing, but but to feed into this like need for physical touch, really it's the cuddling, it's the, even when I am in the midst of like doing the dishes or cooking dinner, if Coda comes up behind me and just gives me a hug from behind, or if he, if we're cuddling and he just is petting my hair, things like that really do kind of like feed into that need for physical touch for me. And obviously, like, not letting our sexual intimacy go too long in between, that really is important, because even if he's doing everything else and it's been way too long since the last time we had any physical interaction as far as like sexual intimacy is concerned, that starts to weigh on me, and it really starts to feel like maybe he doesn't love me anymore. Maybe he doesn't find me attractive anymore. Maybe.
This is for me kind of what we had just talked about earlier about quality time. This is an area that we've really had to work on a lot, because since this is another one of those things that's not really on my radar, I can go days and go, everything's fine, you know? And then I realized, wow, I haven't even come up and even given her a hug in 3 days. Not a big deal for me, but it is for her. And so we've had to do a lot of work in this area. When I say we, I actually mean me. I've had to do a lot of work in this area because I realized, especially since this is her primary, I have to put a lot of effort into it. Effort not in terms of that, oh gosh, you know, this is just, I have to put so much effort. No, because since it's not one of my love languages, but it is for her, I need to remind myself, hey, when is the last time that you at least came up and just gave your wife a hug? When's the last time that you just came up and put your hand through her hair and just said, hey, I love you, you're so beautiful, just little things like that. Because that is important to her. And so I try to really make an effort to say, okay, I know this is not on your radar, but it needs to be, so that you can keep this intimacy with your wife, since it is her primary.
And I think that rather than calling it effort, you should maybe think about it as being mindful.
Mindful, that's the word. I couldn't think of the word earlier, but yes, that's the word I was trying to search for instead of effort. Being mindful of it, that's very, very important. And I think this goes hand in hand, like we were talking about what we said about quality time. Physical touch is the same thing. You got to make the effort, and you got to be mindful of doing that. Otherwise, yeah, it can get, there were times where I felt really bad. I didn't mean to, but it had been literally days since she had that physical touch, and it was weighing on her, and it started weighing our relationship, and I felt really bad. And so you really want to work hard on that.
So if you have a head of household that their primary is physical touch, really taking the initiative as a taken in hand to initiate and be open to physical intimacy, because most men that their primary love language is physical touch, they really like to lean into that intimate connection. And so being open, being available to that, initiating it, because sometimes it can feel really daunting to always being the one saying, I have this need, will you fulfill it? I have this need, will you fulfill it? But to have that being offered is better.
Very good point. Very good point.
And so offer that to them.
Yes.
Find ways to connect physically. If you are out and about, holding hands, giving a hug, you know, kissing them when they come in the door, finding time maybe before bed, you cuddle up in bed and you kind of, you know, just have, because here's the part that like I think that Coda doesn't always understand is when we have that quality time together, it's a lot of conversation, which feeds into his like words of affirmation, right?
Right.
But I literally could just cuddle up and not say anything, and that really feeds into my love language.
You're right. And this is something I've had, I still don't have, I don't think, the total picture. I'm getting better, but I don't have the total picture there, because again, it's just something I'm learning about her.
And so realizing like just cuddling up, you don't have to have a conversation. Just being available to kind of create that physical connection, even if it's not sexual, even if it's just cuddling, even if it's just holding hands. You know, think about when you walk by, if they're sitting down, just put your hand on their shoulder and just, you know, lean in and give them a little bit of physical interaction. That really does kind of feed into that love language so much. And so finding little everyday ways, but really don't underestimate the importance of physical intimacy for someone with physical touch, because that really is like the backbone of this love language, because without that, they really do start to feel like the relationship is falling apart.
Remember we were talking about earlier about, not getting words of affirmation. the hole that they start to dig, that continues for somebody that obviously with Arya having that, that's what it continues. They just keep digging that hole, and it's hard to get them back out of that. So really, you got to be mindful a lot with people that need physical touch, but it's not a bad thing. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing to be aware of what your spouse needs, and to try to follow through with that. So.
Because when you really love someone, you really want to give them what they need in order to feel loved. And so
really? Yeah, no, that's true.
And so you really don't want to withhold that
No,
from them. You
all.
really want to be mindful to give them things in a meaningful way that build them up, that build up your relationship, that help them feel loved. And I feel like, we were talking a lot about like taking in hands and what they can do for their head of household, but this really does go both ways.
Yes.
And I think that as you listen to this podcast, I think we did a really good job of actually presenting it in a balanced way that kind of goes both ways.
Hope so. Yeah, hope so.
So even if you're head of household thinking about this, think about how you can do the same thing for your taken in hand, because it is kind of this cycle of she feeds into you, you feed into her. And when you're both doing that, then that's when you get a really good connection. That's when you get a really good relationship.
When you do this, she will want to be obedient and he will want to lead. And that's what you want. If you're feeding into each other, if you're the taken in hand trying to fulfill the love languages of your head of household, he's going to want to lead better, and he's going to want to lead, feel the need to lead. If you are the head of household, you are doing the love languages for your taken in hand, she's going to want to be obedient. She's going to want to follow the rules. And that's the beauty of all of this. If you both are serving one another and trying to help each other achieve what you need in order to feel a part of the relationship and that the other person cares about you, it's amazing how just doing these things will make the other person want to do with and follow through with the roles that you guys have assigned. And so that's why this is so important. That's why we wanted to talk about it.
If you've never heard of the love languages before, again, the book is The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. I will try to find the quiz and link it down below so that if you have no idea what your love language is, if you listen to all of these and you're like, yeah, all of that sounds
all
good.
of that sounds like me.
Definitely take the quiz.
Yeah.
I think that it is very, very common that you have one that is just a standout primary. You at least have one that is a strong secondary. I actually have 2 that are fairly equal secondaries. But there's usually at least 1 or 2 or 3 that don't necessarily matter as much.
Yeah.
And when you figure that out, that can really help kind of give you a blueprint of how to approach these things for yourself. So again, I will try to link that down below so that if you've never taken that quiz before, I'm going to have Coda take it actually, since he hasn't. It definitely is kind of worth the few minutes that it takes to figure those things out. So again, thank you for joining us for this conversation. If you want bonus content and you want to support what we're doing here, link to our Patreon is down below. Other than that, we will see you guys next time.
See you later.